At 1:13 in the morning, during the worst snowstorm Ohio had seen in 12 years, my husband opened the back door of his family's restaurant and told me to walk. I was 7 months pregnant. My shoes were house slippers. My phone was in his mother's purse. My car keys were in his father's pocket. My wallet was on the office desk behind them. And the only thing they let me keep was my dead father's old work jacket, because as my mother-in-law said, nobody wants that rag anyway. They thought they were throwing me out with nothing. They thought the baby and I would disappear quietly into the cold. They thought I was just the soft-spoken wife who baked pies, smiled through insults, and cleaned up everyone else's mess. But 13 days later, I walked back into their grand opening with my father's jacket buttoned over my belly, an entire town behind me, and one question that made my husband's hands shake so hard he dropped his speech. If this cobbler came from your grandmother, I asked, why is my father's handwriting on the original recipe card? By the end of that morning, their ribbon was never cut. Their biggest catering contract was canceled in front of everyone. The local newspaper changed its headline before lunch. The donation jar they had filled using my baby's ultrasound picture was emptied on live video. And the sign above their first restaurant, the one that had stolen my father's name for 22 years, came down before sunset. All because one garbage truck driver saw a small bluebird patch on my father's jacket and slammed on his brakes like he had seen a ghost. My name is Hannah Miller. Before that night, most people in Brookhaven, Ohio knew me as Hannah Price. Nolan Price's wife, the quiet one, the pregnant one, the one behind the counter at Price Family Kitchen who remembered who liked extra gravy, who couldn't eat onions, whose coffee needed 2 creams, and whose husband had passed the year before. Price Family Kitchen was the kind of place every small American town has at least one of. Red vinyl booths, a bell over the door, a hand-painted menu board, coffee that tasted burned after 3 in the afternoon, but people drank it anyway because the waitress knew their names. A pie case near the register, a framed newspaper clipping by the hallway, a wall full of fake family history, and above the front window, painted in cheerful yellow letters, the words, "Home of the famous Price Cobbler." The Prices acted like that cobbler had come down from heaven wrapped in their family name. They sold it by the slice. They sold it whole for Thanksgiving. They sold it in little cardboard boxes at the county fair. They put it on mugs, aprons, postcards, t-shirts, Christmas tins, and little jars of peach syrup tourists bought at the register. Darlene Price, my mother-in-law, loved to stand by the dessert case and tell customers that cobbler is 3 generations of Price women in one bite. Every time she said it, something in me went cold. Because the cobbler did not belong to the Prices. It belonged to my father, Eddie Miller. My dad had been a line cook, a church volunteer, a part-time handyman, and the kind of man who could fix a leaky sink with one hand while flipping pancakes with the other. His hands always smelled like flour motor oil and peppermint gum. He whistled when he worked. He left $20 bills under coffee mugs for waitresses who had bad weeks. He slipped extra biscuits into takeout bags when he knew a family was stretching one meal into 2. And when Price Family Kitchen nearly closed down after Nolan's grandfather got sick, my father saved it. Not with lawyers, not with investors, not with some dramatic business plan. He saved it the way ordinary good men save things, by showing up early, staying late, repairing equipment himself, covering what money he could, and making food so warm and honest that people came back because it tasted like somebody cared whether they made it through the day. His chicken pot pie kept that kitchen alive through 2 winters. His cinnamon peach cobbler turned the restaurant into a local landmark. People drove from 3 counties away for that cobbler. They asked for it at funerals, graduations, baby showers, church suppers, 4th of July cookouts, and Sunday dinners when grief had made cooking impossible. The Prices called it our family recipe. My father's name was nowhere, not on the menu, not on the wall, not in the framed Price family history beside the register. When I asked about it once back when I still believed asking nicely could make people fair, Darlene smiled at me like I had tracked mud across her carpet. "Hannah, honey," she said, stirring sugar into coffee she had not made herself. "Your daddy was a good cook. Nobody denies that. But good cooks work for families. They don't become the family." I was 23 then, newly married, still trying to be loved by people who had already decided I was useful, not valuable. So I swallowed it. That became my habit. I swallowed things. When Darlene introduced me to customers as Nolan's little helper, I swallowed it. When Frank Nolan's father joked that I was cheap labor with a wedding ring, I swallowed it. When Nolan's brother Tyson said my father was basically a cook who got lucky with peaches, I swallowed it so hard I tasted blood. And when Nolan told me, "Don't make everything emotional," I swallowed that too. That was Nolan's favorite word for me, emotional. When I cried because his parents gave Tyson and his fiancée a new SUV and gave me a used stroller with one broken wheel, I was emotional. When Darlene left me out of the family Christmas photo and cropped half my shoulder out of the Facebook post, I was emotional. When Nolan forgot our anniversary dinner because he was helping Tyson choose countertops for his new house, I was emotional. When I asked why we were still paying rent on a 2-bedroom duplex while Nolan's parents helped Tyson buy a 4-bedroom home, Nolan said, "They're investing in people who know how to appreciate it." I should have left then. But if you have ever been slowly made to feel small by a family, you know it does not happen all at once. It happens at Sunday dinner when everyone is laughing and you realize the joke was about you. It happens when your husband says, "My mom didn't mean it that way," until you stop trusting your own ears. It happens when you become the person who brings dessert, washes dishes, pays bills, remembers birthdays, works late covers, shifts, smiles for photos, and still gets called ungrateful. By the time I got pregnant, I had gotten very good at disappearing while standing in plain sight. The baby changed that. Not because Nolan suddenly became kinder. He didn't. Not because Darlene softened. She didn't. The baby changed me because for the first time in years, I started asking one question every day. Would I let someone treat my daughter this way? And every day the answer got louder. Number. The first warning came at my baby shower. Darlene insisted on hosting it at the restaurant. She said it was family tradition, though I had never seen her throw anything for me that did not also advertise the business. The napkin said baby Price. The cake said, "Welcome, little Price girl." The cookies were shaped like the letter P. Not H, not M, not even a flower or a rattle, just P. Price, price, price. When June Callahan, an older woman from church who had known my father, asked what middle name we had chosen, Darlene answered before I could open my mouth. "We're still deciding what fits the Price family." I was sitting right there, 7 months pregnant, holding a paper plate with a slice of cake I suddenly could not eat. Nolan heard her. He saw my face. And he looked down at his phone. That was the day I realized my daughter was not even born yet, and they were already trying to take her name from me. The night everything broke started with the electric bill. I was in the restaurant office after closing, sitting in Nolan's chair because my feet were swollen, and my back felt like someone had tied a knot in it. The office smelled like printer ink, fryer oil, peppermint gum, and the old carpet Darlene kept saying she would replace after the second location opened. The power company had called our duplex that morning because Nolan had forgotten to pay again, and I wanted to see if the restaurant account was also behind. The desk drawer was locked. It had never been locked before. I found the key taped behind a framed photo of Nolan's parents at the county fair because Nolan had never been as clever as he thought he was. Inside the drawer was a blue binder. On the front, in Darlene's neat handwriting, were the words, "Expansion Notes, Miller Issue." My maiden name, Miller. I remember staring at those 2 words for a long moment. The baby shifted under my ribs. The restaurant was silent except for the old ice machine groaning in the back hall. I opened the binder. The first page was a printed draft of a Facebook announcement. After 3 decades of hard work, sacrifice, and family loyalty, Price Family Kitchen is proud to announce our second location. Built from Grandma Price's recipes, our family values, and our commitment to tradition. Grandma Price's recipes. My throat went dry. Grandma Price had never baked anything more complicated than boxed brownies. I turned the page. There were menu mock-ups, merchandise designs, a local magazine interview draft, a speech Nolan was supposed to give at the grand opening. In that speech, he called my father a former employee who helped in the early days. A former employee. My father had worked 14-hour shifts in that kitchen when Darlene was home watching daytime television and calling it managing the brand. My father had missed my school concerts because someone had to keep the restaurant open. My father had used his own grocery money to buy peaches the first summer the cobbler went viral because the prices were broke and too proud to admit it. I turned another page. That was when I saw the text messages. Printed, highlighted, organized. Darlene to Nolan. Once the baby comes, Hannah will be harder to move. Get her to sign before February. Nolan to Darlene. She won't sign if she knows the recipe rights are worth anything. Tyson to Nolan. She's too sentimental. Tell her it's just paperwork for the baby. Darlene. Don't call it ownership. She gets dramatic when she hears words like that. Then another from Nolan. I can get her signature if I catch her tired enough. I sat back slowly. My hands were cold. The baby kicked once hard enough to hurt. There were more pages. A note from a local bank. A draft of a small business loan application with my name listed as a co-guarantor. A draft agreement licensing Grandma Price's original cobbler to a regional grocery chain called Hartwell Markets. And a sticky note in Nolan's handwriting. Hannah signature needed. Use hospital bill angle. Hospital bill angle. That was the moment something inside me went still. Not broken, not screaming. Still, the kind of stillness that comes when your heart realizes it has been pleading with a locked door. I took photos of every page with my phone, or at least I thought I did. I didn't hear Nolan come in. The office door opened behind me. He stood there in his dark winter coat, snow melting in his hair, looking at the binder in my lap. For 3 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then his face changed. Not guilty, not ashamed, annoyed. Like I had opened his mail. What are you doing? He asked. I closed the binder. I was looking for the electric bill. His eyes dropped to my phone. Hannah. That one word told me everything. He stepped forward. I stood up too quickly and had to grab the desk. The baby pressed low against my belly. Don't touch me, I said. Nolan stopped. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're looking at. I laughed once. It was a sound I had never heard come out of my own mouth before. No, I said, I understand perfectly. He reached for my phone. I stepped back. Nolan. Why is my name on a loan paper I've never seen? He said nothing. Why is your mother calling me the Miller issue? Still nothing. Why are you planning to use my father's recipes for a second location and erase him again? That did it. His eyes hardened. Your father worked here, Hannah. He didn't own this place. He saved this place. My family paid him. My father fed your family when your register couldn't. His face flushed. You need to lower your voice. It was a quiet sentence. A husband sentence. A sentence men like Nolan use when they know they are losing the truth and want control back. I looked at him, really looked at him. The expensive watch his parents bought him. The clean hands. The wedding ring he never wore in the kitchen because he said it caught on things, though it never seemed to catch when he posed for photos beside Tyson's fiancée. You were going to trick me, I said. His mouth tightened. We were going to protect the business. From me, from your emotions. I don't know what I would have said next because Darlene walked in. She was wearing a cream wool coat, pearl earrings, and the calm face of a woman who had been waiting for this conversation and already decided how it would end. Behind her came Frank, thick-necked and silent, and Tyson holding his phone like he hoped to record me acting crazy. Darlene looked at the binder, then at me, then at my stomach. Well, she said, that's unfortunate. Not wrong, not cruel, not sorry, unfortunate. I held my phone tighter. I'm leaving, I said, and I'm taking this with me. Darlene smiled. No, honey, you're not. Frank moved first. He didn't hurt me. He didn't have to. He simply stepped close enough that I could smell his aftershave and the coffee on his breath. Nolan reached for my phone again. This time Tyson came around behind me. I was 7 months pregnant, off balance, trapped between 3 people who knew exactly how scared I was and were counting on it. Nolan took the phone from my hand. I looked at him. There are moments in a marriage when love dies loudly. There are moments when it dies quietly. Mine died in the silence after my husband took my phone and handed it to his mother. Darlene dropped it into her purse. Keys, she said. I need my car. You need rest, she replied. You're clearly upset. Frank took my car keys from the hook beside the door. Tyson opened the back exit. Snow blew into the hallway. It was the kind of cold that made the building seem suddenly fragile. I looked at Nolan, my husband, the man who had cried at our wedding when I walked down the aisle wearing my mother's veil. The man who had put his hand on my belly 2 weeks earlier and whispered, I hope she has your eyes. He would stop this. Even then, some loyal, foolish part of me believed he would stop this. Nolan, I said. He looked away. Darlene sighed. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I had no coat. My winter coat was in our duplex. But my father's old canvas work jacket hung on a hook by the kitchen door. Brown, frayed at the cuffs, lined with faded flannel. On the left chest was a small bluebird patch my father had sewn there after a flood rescue years before. I reached for it. Darlene laughed under her breath. That thing again, fine. Take it. Then she leaned closer, her perfume sweet and cold. Maybe the weather will teach you what this family couldn't, when to keep your mouth shut. I put my arms into my father's jacket. It still smelled faintly like cedar chips and smoke. Or maybe I only imagined that because I needed him so badly. I placed both hands over my stomach. Then I walked out. The door closed behind me. The cold hit my face like a slap. For a few seconds, I just stood there in the alley behind Price Family Kitchen while snow filled the yellow light above the back door. I had no phone, no wallet, no keys, no money except whatever coins might be in the jacket pockets. My slippers sank into slush. The baby shifted once, then stopped. I waited. Nothing. My heart started pounding. Sweetheart, I whispered. I pressed both hands against my belly. The wind threw snow into my eyes. Please, I said, move for me. Still nothing. I started walking because if I stood still, fear would take me to the ground. Brookhaven looked different in a snowstorm. The hardware store sign flickered. The laundromat windows were fogged white. The church on Elm Street had a nativity scene still up, even though Christmas had passed 3 weeks earlier, baby Jesus half buried under snow. I laughed when I saw that. Then I cried because I was tired and cold and pregnant, and because sometimes your body chooses the worst possible moment to remember you are human. At the bus stop on Maple and 3rd, I found 78 cents in my father's jacket. 2 quarters, 2 dimes, a nickel, 3 pennies. I counted them 4 times because panic makes you believe math might change if you ask nicely. The bus fare was $2. When the first bus came, I stepped forward anyway. The doors opened. Warm air rolled over me like mercy. The driver looked at my stomach, then at my slippers, then at my coins. Fare's $2, she said. I only have 78 cents, I said. Please, I'm pregnant. I just need to get somewhere warm. Her face tightened, but not with cruelty. With fear. Policy fear. Job fear. The kind of fear that makes decent people act smaller than they are. I'm sorry, she said. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. I stood in the red glow of its taillights until they disappeared. That was when I almost sat down in the snow. Not because I wanted to give up, because my legs were no longer asking my permission. Then finally the baby kicked. Once. Small. Weak. But there. I sobbed so hard I bent forward. Okay, I whispered. Okay, baby, I'm still here, I'm still walking. From the end of the street, I heard a low grinding sound. A garbage truck. Big. Green. Ugly. Beautiful. It crawled through the storm with its hazard lights blinking. I raised one arm. The truck slowed, then stopped. The driver leaned across the passenger seat and opened the door. He was a huge black man with a gray beard, a navy knit cap, and eyes that looked tired until they landed on my jacket. Then everything about him changed. He stared at the bluebird patch. His hand froze on the steering wheel. For a second, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Where did you get that jacket? He asked. My father, I said, teeth chattering. Eddie Miller. The driver's face broke. Not dramatically. Not like in movies. It broke quietly around the eyes. Little Hannah, he whispered. I did not know this man, but he knew me. He was out of the truck before I could answer. He helped me into the passenger seat, wrapped his own coat around my legs, turned the heat all the way up, and opened the glove compartment with shaking hands. Inside was an old Polaroid. The edges were soft from years of being touched. In the picture, my father stood beside a younger Otis in front of a flooded bridge. Both men were soaked to the bone. My father was grinning, one arm around Otis's shoulders like nearly drowning was just another reason to laugh. Hanging from the rearview mirror was a worn St. Christopher medal. Otis touched it. Your daddy gave me this, he said. Told me stubborn men need extra angels. My throat closed. He saved you. Otis nodded. Flood of 2002. I was trapped in my truck under the old bridge. Water up to my chest. Eddie climbed in through the passenger window with a rope tied around his waist and told me if I died before paying him back for a sandwich, he'd be personally offended. A laugh came out of me before I could stop it. That sounded exactly like my father. Otis picked up his phone and made one call. "June," he said when the person answered. "I found Eddie's girl. She's pregnant. She's in trouble. Light the house up." That was how I met Otis Reed. And that was how the worst night of my life became the first night I understood my father had never really left me unprotected. June Callahan lived in a yellow house 2 blocks behind the old high school. She was a retired maternity nurse with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a way of giving orders that made grown men obey before they remembered they had choices. When Otis helped me up her porch steps, June opened the door in flannel pajamas and snow boots. She took one look at me and said, "Bathroom first, warm socks second, questions third." I cried in her bathroom. Not loudly, not beautifully. I sat on the closed toilet seat with a towel around my shoulders and cried the way people cry when they finally stop performing survival for 5 minutes. June knocked once. "Baby moving." "Yes," I said. "Bleeding. Number. Pain. Only everywhere." "That means you're alive. Come out when you can stand." In her kitchen, she checked my blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat with an old fetal monitor she kept because retirement is a suggestion, and made me drink chicken broth from a mug. Otis sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his coffee. He kept looking at the jacket. Finally, I touched the patch. "What is this?" I asked. June sat down across from me. "That bluebird means people owe your father more than they ever got to repay." I looked between them. "People," Otis nodded. "Bluebird Rescue." It wasn't official. Just a bunch of regular folks with trucks, boats, generators, and bad knees. When the river came over the banks, Eddie organized half the town before the county even found its emergency radios. My dad never told me. June smiled sadly. Eddie never announced the good he did. He just did it and went home smelling like wet socks. Something inside my chest loosened and hurt at the same time. June walked to a cabinet above the refrigerator and pulled down a small tin box. It was the kind Danish butter cookies come in. Every grandmother in America has one. Only this one did not have sewing supplies. June opened it and took out an envelope. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting. Hannah Bug. Nobody had called me that since I was 16. My hands started shaking. June put the envelope on the table but kept her palm over it for a second. "Before you open this, you need to understand something. Your father didn't leave you a fortune. He wasn't that kind of man. What he left you was better." "What?" June removed her hand. "Proof that you were never what the prices said you were." I opened the envelope. Inside was a recipe card yellowed at the edges. My father's chicken pot pie. My father's peach cobbler. And beneath the ingredients, written in his careful block letters, was a note. "Hannah, if anyone ever tries to tell you this food belongs to them because they owned the building, remember this: a table is only wood until somebody with love feeds people at it. Don't fight to be included where you were only tolerated. Build a longer table." "Dad," I covered my mouth. Otis looked away. June wiped her eyes like she was angry at them. There was something else in the envelope. A small brass key and a folded receipt for a storage unit on Route 9. June tapped it. "He paid 20 years in advance." "What's in it?" She smiled sadly, knowing Eddie probably trouble wrapped in newspaper. The next morning, Otis drove me to the storage facility. June came too because she said pregnant women should not face emotional bombs without snacks. Unit 14B smelled like dust cardboard and old wood. There were only 6 boxes inside. No treasure, no dramatic safe, no secret $1 million account. Just my father's life packed neatly by a man who knew he might not have time later. Photo albums, recipe notebooks, a cassette recorder, a shoebox full of thank you cards from families he had fed for free, a coffee can labeled Hannah's Maybe Someday Diner. Inside the can was $4,327 in cash, mostly 20s, some 5s, a few quarters. I laughed and sobbed at the same time. My father had saved diner money in a coffee can like a Depression-era grandpa. At the bottom of the last box, we found a small notebook. On the first page, he had written, "Price Family Kitchen." What I gave what they promised, what they forgot. It was not a legal record. It was not clean or official. It was a tired man's memory written down after midnight with coffee stains on the corners, grocery math in the margins, and little notes like Hannah liked the burnt edge piece beside the cobbler measurements. Page after page, my father had recorded ordinary things. 300 pounds of peaches paid for by Eddie. New oven repair paid by Eddie. Payroll covered by Eddie when Frank lost the weekend deposit. Cobbler recipe developed by Eddie and Hannah, summer 2004. Darlene promised to put Miller name on menu. Never did. Frank promised profit share after debt cleared. Never did. Nolan heard all of this at 16. Said, "Dad, don't cheat, Mr. Miller." My breath stopped. Nolan had known. Even as a teenager, he had known. I sat down on an overturned crate and pressed one hand to my belly. June crouched in front of me. "Hannah." He knew, I whispered. Otis stood in the doorway, shoulders filling the frame. The snow outside had stopped. Morning light lay across the concrete in pale strips. My father's notebook rested in my lap like a warm hand in a wound. That was the worst part. Not that Darlene was cruel. Not that Frank was greedy. Not that Tyson saw me as an obstacle. The worst part was Nolan. Nolan had been a boy once who knew my father was being used. And he grew into a man who used me the same way. For 3 days I stayed at June's house. I slept in her guest room under a quilt made of old church t-shirts. Otis checked on us twice a day. By the second night, he had brought a car seat, 3 bags of baby clothes from his sisters, and a stuffed rabbit so ugly it looked like it had survived a house fire. I named it Walter. On the 4th day, Nolan posted about me on Facebook. Darlene wrote the caption. I knew because every sentence smelled like her. "Please pray for our family." Hannah has been struggling emotionally during this pregnancy and left after a misunderstanding. We only want her and the baby safe. If you see her, please contact Nolan. Underneath was a photo from 6 months earlier. Me behind the restaurant counter, tired smiling flower on my cheek. Nolan had cropped the picture so my father's old jacket on the wall behind me was not visible. Comments poured in, praying. Pregnancy hormones can be scary. Poor Nolan. Darlene, you're such a strong mother. I read them from June's old tablet while sitting at her kitchen table. My hands did not shake this time. That scared me a little. June watched me carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I spent years wanting them to tell the truth. And I set the tablet down. And now I understand they're never going to." Otis nodded from the doorway. "So you tell it." I looked at him. He shrugged. Not loud, not messy, just true. The next day, Otis drove me past my duplex. I don't know why I asked him to. Maybe some part of me needed to see the last door close before I stopped hoping it might open. My clothes were on the porch in black trash bags. Not folded. Not boxed. Trash bags. Snow had melted into the plastic and frozen again along the edges. On top of the first bag was a yellow sticky note in Nolan's handwriting. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I stared at it through the windshield. For one night I hated myself for staying so long. For missing so many signs, for excusing so many insults, for building a marriage out of apologies Nolan never made. June, sitting beside me, reached over and put her hand on mine. "Survival is not stupidity, baby," she said. "Sometimes it's just the road you had to take before you found the exit." I cried then, not because I wanted Nolan back, because I finally knew I didn't. 2 days later, a customer June knew sent us a photo from the restaurant. On the counter beside the register was a glass jar wrapped in pink ribbon. Taped to the front was my ultrasound picture, the one I had left on our refrigerator. Across the jar, in Darlene's perfect handwriting, were the words, "Support baby price." I stared at the picture until the words blurred. They had taken my phone, my keys, my home, my father's name, and now they were passing my daughter's face around like a collection plate. People were dropping cash into that jar and telling Nolan he was brave. That was when I stopped wanting an apology. I wanted witnesses. Truth in a small town has to be timed. If you say it too soon, people call it drama. If you say it with tears, people call it unstable. If you say it alone, people call it your side. So I waited. I let Nolan text my old number until Darlene realized I didn't have it. I let the Prices act worried in public. I let them keep posting prayers and heart emojis. I let them prepare for the grand opening of the second Price family kitchen. But I was preparing too. June called 3 women from church who still remembered the night my father cooked for 50 flood victims with 2 working burners and no electricity. Otis called the old Bluebird rescue crew. Mrs. Delgado called the county reporter and said you might want to bring a camera to the Price opening. Something true is finally going to happen there. And I made one phone call myself to Hartwell Markets, the grocery chain that was about to put Grandma Price's original cobbler into 12 stores across the county. I did not threaten them. I did not talk like a lawyer. I simply said, before you put that recipe on a shelf under their family name, you may want to attend the grand opening and hear where it really came from. The woman on the phone was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What time?" Valentine's Day arrived bright, freezing, and blue, the kind of winter morning that looks clean even when it is not. Darlene called the opening a celebration of love, legacy, and local family values. She invited the mayor, the pastor, the county paper, Hartwell Markets, the bank manager, the church fundraiser committee, the county fair food board, half the town. She did not invite me. Of course she didn't. But my father apparently had known everybody. That is the thing about good men. They do not always leave money. Sometimes they leave doors. On the morning of the grand opening, I woke before sunrise. The baby had been restless all night. I sat on the edge of June's guest bed wearing a simple navy dress she had altered for my belly and my father's work jacket over it. The bluebird patch sat over my heart. In the mirror, I looked tired, pregnant, pale, but not broken. June knocked once and came in carrying a small box. Inside was a necklace, a tiny silver spoon on a chain. Your dad gave it to me after my husband died, she said. He said nobody should eat grief alone. I held it in my palm. I can't take this. You're not taking it, you're carrying it. Otis drove us to the new restaurant in his sister's minivan because, as he said, no woman should make an entrance in a garbage truck unless she wants to terrify people, and we're saving that option. The new Price family kitchen was on the edge of town in a remodeled brick building that used to be a pharmacy. Darlene had gone all out. Red ribbon, white tablecloths, pink balloons, a chalkboard sign that said, 3 generations, 1 family table. My stomach turned. Through the window, I saw Nolan standing beside his mother wearing a gray suit and the expression of a man who had slept poorly but still believed the room belonged to him. Tyson and his fiancée were taking selfies near the dessert table. Frank was laughing with the mayor. The Hartwell Markets representative stood near the front with a folder tucked under one arm. The county fair director was there too. So was Pastor Glenn. And there, on a raised display under a glass dome, was my father's peach cobbler. A little card in front of it read, Grandma Price's original cobbler. Since 1989. I waited outside until the room got quiet. Nolan stepped up to the small microphone near the ribbon. He unfolded his speech. Darlene stood beside him, smiling like she had personally invented family values. Nolan cleared his throat. This cobbler began with my grandmother, he said, who taught us that family recipes are sacred. That was when I opened the door. The bell rang. Every head turned. At first, nobody moved. Then silence spread through the room like spilled ink. Nolan froze with the paper in his hand. Darlene's smile stayed on her face for 1 second too long before it cracked at the edges. I stepped inside. My father's jacket was buttoned over my belly. The bluebird patch was visible. In the back of the room, 3 older men and 2 women looked at the patch. Then, without a word, they moved away from the wall and stood behind me. The old Bluebird rescue crew, people my father had pulled from floodwater, fed after fires, driven to appointments, given cash to when pride made it hard to ask. One by one, they recognized the patch. One by one, they stood. That was the first moment Darlene looked afraid. Not because of me. Because I was no longer alone. Hannah, she said loudly. Thank God, we've been so worried. She came toward me with arms open. I stepped back. Not far. Just enough. Her arms hung there for a moment before she lowered them. Nolan looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Hannah, he said. I looked at him. Then at the donation jar on the counter. It was there too. Support baby Price. Full of cash. Something hot and clean went through me. My baby has a name, I said. The room went quiet. Darlene's smile tightened. Honey, this isn't the time. No, I said. That's what you always say when it's finally my turn to speak. A few people shifted. Pastor Glenn lowered his coffee cup. The mayor looked toward the door like she regretted being early. Nolan stepped closer. Let's talk outside. I looked at his hand reaching for my elbow. Touch me, I said softly. And I will tell everyone why my slippers were soaked in snow the night you said I left voluntarily. His hand stopped. The room heard that. I wanted them to hear it. Not shouted. Not sobbed. Heard. Darlene's face changed. Hannah is under a lot of stress, she said to the room. Pregnancy can make women. Don't finish that sentence. My voice was still quiet. That made it stronger. I turned to the dessert table. My father's name was Eddie Miller. Most of you knew him. The room softened. I saw it happen. People remembered him. Mr. Lawson, who used to sit at booth 6 every morning. Mrs. Delgado, whose husband's funeral my father catered for free. Coach Ramsey, who ate my dad's pot pie after every losing football game and claimed it restored his will to live. My father created that cobbler, I said. He paid for the peaches when this family couldn't. He repaired the ovens. He covered payroll. He kept the old restaurant open because he believed food mattered when people were tired, broke, grieving, or lonely. Frank's face darkened. Darlene snapped, "That is enough." I reached into my jacket. Nolan flinched. I pulled out my father's recipe card. Not a weapon. Something stronger. This is his handwriting, I said. This is the original recipe card, and this, I took out the notebook, is every promise the Price family made to him and broke. Tyson laughed too loud. Oh, come on, a notebook, that's your big proof. I looked at him. No, Tyson, this is my grief, the proof is all of you. He stopped laughing. I turned to the room. The proof is that not one person in this family corrected the menu. Not one corrected the Facebook posts. Not one corrected the history on the wall. They used his food, his kindness, his labor, and then they used me. Darlene's voice sharpened. You ate from this family's table for years. I looked at her. No, I served it. That landed. I saw it in people's faces. Because it was simple. Because it was true. Nolan's eyes were wet now. I might have cared once. Hannah, he whispered, please. Please, what I asked. Please protect your reputation. Please stay quiet. Please let your mother call me unstable while you pass a donation jar with my daughter's ultrasound on it. Murmurs moved through the room. Darlene glanced at the jar. For the first time, she looked nervous. Good. I walked to the counter and picked up the jar. How much did you collect? Frank said, put that down. This has my baby's picture on it. It was for medical expenses, Darlene said. My medical expenses, I asked. The ones you told Nolan to use as an angle to get my signature. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. People know the sound of a secret accidentally named. Nolan closed his eyes. Darlene went pale. I did not pull out bank documents. I did not explain loan terms. I did not turn that room into a courtroom. I simply took one printed page from my pocket. A screenshot. Darlene's text. Use the hospital bill angle. I held it up. Pastor Glenn stood. Mrs. Delgado put her hand over her mouth. The mayor looked directly at Darlene and then away. The Hartwell representative closed her folder. That small sound was quiet, but Darlene heard it. Her head snapped toward the woman. Please, Darlene said. This is a private family matter. The Hartwell woman looked at the cobbler under glass, then at me, then at the recipe card in my hand. No, she said. It appears to be a branding matter. Darlene's lips parted. For once, no polished sentence came out. That was the first honest thing she had done all day. Nolan stepped forward. Hannah, I didn't want it to happen this way. That sentence almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because men like Nolan always think the problem is how the truth arrives, not what they did to make it necessary. You didn't want it to happen this way, I said. How did you want it to happen? Quietly with me. Signing papers between contractions. With your mother posting my baby online, while you told people I was unstable. He swallowed. I was trying to keep the family business together, and I was trying to keep my family from disappearing. My voice cracked then, only once. But everyone heard it. My father is dead. My mother is dead. This baby is the only blood family I have left. And you tried to take her story before she was even born. That was when Otis came forward. He held up the old Polaroid from his truck. My father young and soaked and smiling beside him after the flood. This man saved my life, Otis said. And he never once asked me to call him family so he could use me. He just acted like family when I needed one. Mrs. Delgado stood next. Then Mr. Lawson. Then Coach Ramsey. One by one, people began telling stories. Not speeches. Stories. Eddie brought soup when my chemo started. Eddie fixed our furnace and wouldn't take money. Eddie paid for my son's football cleats. Eddie sat with my husband the night before he died because I was too tired to stay awake. With every story, Darlene got smaller. Not physically, socially, spiritually. The way people shrink when the room finally sees the shape of them. The county reporter had been filming since my third sentence. Darlene saw the camera. That was when her mask fully slipped. "You ungrateful little girl," she hissed at me. "We gave you a name." I looked around the room, at the people who knew my father, at June, at Otis, at the cobbler under glass, at my husband who had mistaken my silence for permission. Then I looked back at Darlene. "No," I said, "you borrowed one." After that, the room was no longer hers. The Hartwell representative stepped forward and placed her folder on the nearest table. "Hartwell Markets will not be moving forward with the cobbler placement," she said. Darlene looked like she had been slapped. The county fair director cleared his throat. "Until this is sorted out, the fair board will be reviewing the Price Kitchen booth agreement." Pastor Glenn removed the donation jar from the counter. "This money was collected under false pretenses," he said quietly. "It will be returned. Today." Frank muttered, "This is ridiculous," and started toward the back door. Otis stepped into his path. He didn't touch him. He didn't need to. Frank stopped. Nolan was still standing by the microphone, his speech hanging from one hand. Darlene turned on him. "Say something," she snapped. For the first time since I had known him, Nolan looked at his mother and did not move. "Say something," she repeated. He looked at me. Then at my father's recipe card. Then at the jar with my daughter's ultrasound taped to it. And something in his face collapsed. Not enough to forgive, not enough to repair, but enough to show the room that he knew. "My grandmother didn't make the cobbler," he said. Darlene inhaled sharply. Nolan's voice shook. "Eddie Miller did." The room went completely still. He looked down at his paper. The grand opening speech. The lie printed neatly in black ink. Then he tore it in half. Darlene slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked across the restaurant. Nobody moved. Nolan touched his cheek. Darlene seemed to realize too late that the camera was still recording. That was the real ending for Darlene Price. Not handcuffs. Not a courtroom. Not some complicated lawsuit. Just one room full of neighbors watching her hand fly and finally understanding what Hannah Miller had been living with for years. I walked to the dessert table. I lifted the little card that said Grandma Price's original cobbler since 1989. I turned it over. With the black marker June had given me that morning, I wrote, "Eddie Miller's Cinnamon Peach Cobbler." Then I set it back in front of the glass dome. No one stopped me. That was when the room began to clap. Not all at once. First June, then Otis, then Mrs. Delgado, then Pastor Glenn, then the old rescue crew, then half the room. Nolan did not clap. He cried. Darlene stood beside the ribbon with her pearls and her ruined smile and watched the story she had stolen walk out of her hands. By sunset, the video was everywhere. "Pregnant wife exposes family restaurant lie at grand opening." That was the first headline. By dinner, the county paper changed it. The man behind Brookhaven's famous cobbler was erased for 22 years. By Monday, Hartwell Markets publicly announced they would not partner with Price Family Kitchen. By Tuesday, the church moved its spring fundraiser to another caterer. By Wednesday, the county fair board suspended the Price booth pending community review. By Thursday, customers were leaving flowers below my father's photo, taped to the old restaurant window. By Friday, someone had covered the yellow words "Home of the Famous Price Cobbler" with a handmade paper sign. It said, "Say his name, Eddie Miller." The Prices tried to take it down. Someone put up another, then another. Then a dozen. For the first time in 22 years, my father's name was bigger than theirs. The second Price Family Kitchen never opened to the public. The ribbon stayed uncut. The balloons deflated in the windows. The white tablecloths were packed away. The new sign was removed from the building 2 weeks later. But that was not the moment that satisfied me most. That came on a cold Saturday morning at the original restaurant. Otis drove me there because I asked him to. June came too. So did half the people who had stood behind me at the grand opening. The restaurant was closed. A handwritten sign on the door said, "Closed for maintenance." But there was no maintenance. Only Nolan standing on a ladder outside with a drill in his hand. Darlene was not there. Frank was not there. Tyson was not there. Just Nolan. His face was pale from the cold. His hands were red. He looked at me once. Then he climbed the ladder and began removing the yellow letters from the window. home of the famous Price cobbler, one screw at a time. The drill whined. The first letter came loose, then the second, then the third. Nobody spoke. People on the sidewalk watched. Cars slowed down. By the time he removed the word price, his hands were shaking so badly he had to stop. I did not help him. I did not comfort him. His shame was not my assignment anymore. When the last letter came down, Nolan carried the whole sign inside like a man carrying a body. That was when I finally felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy, not revenge. Release. 2 weeks later, Nolan came to June's house. He looked thinner, older, less polished. June let him in because I said she could, but Otis sat on the porch the entire time, sharpening a pocket knife he absolutely did not need to sharpen. Nolan stood in the living room holding a grocery bag. Inside were my phone, my keys, my wallet, and the baby blanket his grandmother had crocheted. I should have brought these sooner, he said. Yes, I replied. He looked at my stomach. She's okay. She is. What are you naming her? I thought about not telling him. Then I decided secrecy was not the same as power. Lily. His face crumpled. My grandmother's name. No, I said. My mother's favorite flower. He nodded slowly. I deserve that. I said nothing. He sat down on the edge of June's floral couch like a man waiting to be sentenced by furniture. I was a coward, he said. I believed that. It was the most honest thing he had ever said. My mom pushed. My dad pressured. Tyson kept saying if we didn't expand now, we'd lose everything. And I told myself you'd understand later. No, Nolan. You told yourself I'd forgive you because I always had. His eyes filled. Yes, the old me would have comforted him. The old me would have moved closer. The old me would have said, you're not a bad person, because I had spent years confusing kindness with self-erasure. I stayed where I was. I loved you, he said. I looked at him for a long time. I know. That surprised him. Maybe he expected me to say he never had. Maybe part of me wanted to. But the truth was more painful. I think you loved me in the way weak people love, I said. You loved me when it didn't cost you anything. You loved me when I made your life easier. You loved me when my father's recipes filled your tables, and my hands washed your dishes, and my silence protected your peace. He cried then, quietly. I let him, not because I owed him softness, because his tears were no longer my job. When he asked if we could start over, I said no. Not angrily, not dramatically, just no. He nodded like the word had weight. Then he stood. At the door, he turned back. What happens now? I put one hand on my belly. Now I build a life where my daughter never has to earn a seat at her own table. Lily was born 3 weeks early during an ice storm at 4:22 in the morning, because apparently the women in my family prefer dramatic weather. June delivered her in the ambulance bay because the roads were terrible and the hospital staff was short. Otis paced so hard in the waiting room that a nurse told him either sit down or apply for a job. When Lily cried, the sound went through me like sunlight through a closed curtain. She was tiny, furious, perfect. I held her against my chest and whispered, "You are not a price. You are not a secret. You are not a bargaining chip. You are Lily Miller, and you come from people who feed others without stealing their names." June cried. Otis pretended not to. 2 months later, I unlocked the door to a small, empty storefront on Maple Street. It used to be a barber shop. The floor was scratched. The ceiling tiles were stained. The back sink leaked. It was not impressive. It was mine. Not because I had won a lawsuit. Not because somebody handed me a fortune. Because my father had saved $4,327 in a coffee can. June had loaned me her late husband's tables. Otis had found used kitchen equipment through a cousin, and half the town showed up with paintbrushes. We called it Eddie's Table, not Eddie's Kitchen, not Miller Family Restaurant. Eddie's Table, because my father had been right. A table is only wood until somebody with love feeds people at it. On opening day, I put 3 things on the wall: my father's bluebird patch, his recipe card, and the yellow letters Nolan had removed from the old Price window. Not all of them, just enough. I took the word famous and placed it underneath my father's photo. Then beneath it I hung a sign that said, "No one earns dignity here. You walk in with it." The first customer was Mrs. Delgado. She ordered cobbler. Then she cried before taking a bite. The second was Pastor Glenn. He ordered pot pie and apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner. The third was Nolan. He stood outside for 10 minutes before coming in. He looked at the menu, then at the wall, then at me. "I'm proud of you," he said. I smiled politely. "Thank you." It was the kind of thank you give a stranger who holds a door. His face showed he understood. That was enough. He ordered coffee to go. I charged him full price. 6 months later, Price Family Kitchen closed its second location permanently. The old one stayed open for a while, but Darlene no longer stood at the front counter like a queen receiving visitors. Frank took a job managing inventory at a hardware store. Tyson moved 2 towns over. Nolan sold his truck and started working mornings at a bakery that did not belong to his parents. People asked me if that felt like justice. I always said no. Justice is too big a word for a town this small. What I felt was quieter, cleaner, like taking off shoes that never fit and realizing your feet had been hurting for years. Darlene came into Eddie's table once. It was raining. Lily was 9 months old, sitting in a high chair behind the counter, banging a spoon on the tray like she was calling a board meeting. Darlene looked older, not humbled exactly. Some people do not humble. They only lose audience. She stood near the door, clutching her purse. "I heard you're doing well," she said. "We are." Her eyes moved to Lily. "She looks like Nolan. She looks like herself." Darlene's mouth tightened. Then she looked at the sign. "No one earns dignity here. You walk in with it." For a second, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "You know I did what I thought was best for my family." I wiped the counter slowly. "No, Darlene. You did what protected your pride. You just called it family because that sounded nicer." Her eyes flashed. Same old Darlene. But I was not the same old Hannah. She looked at the cobbler in the display case. "Your father would have wanted peace." That sentence might have worked on me once. It might have made me feel guilty. It might have sent me chasing her approval with both hands. Instead, I looked at my daughter. Lily had applesauce on her chin and 1 sock missing. Peace, I had learned, was not the absence of conflict. Peace was the absence of self-betrayal. "My father wanted people fed," I said. "He never said I had to let thieves sit at the table." Darlene left without ordering. I did not follow. Years later, when Lily was old enough to ask questions, she pointed at the bluebird patch framed on the wall. "Was Grandpa a hero?" she asked. The restaurant was full that afternoon. Mrs. Delgado was laughing near the window. Otis was at the counter arguing with June about whether peach cobbler counted as breakfast. A young mother in the corner was feeding her toddler bites of pot pie. The bell over the door kept ringing. People came in cold and left warmer. I looked at my daughter, then at my father's patch. "No, baby," I said softly. "He was something better." "What?" I smiled. "He was kind when nobody was watching." That night after closing, I stood alone in the dining room with Lily asleep against my shoulder. Snow was falling outside, soft this time. Not the cruel sideways snow from the night Nolan threw me out. The gentle kind. The kind that makes streetlights glow. I walked to the wall and touched my father's bluebird patch. For years I thought legacy meant what people remembered after you died. Now I know better. Legacy is what still protects your children when your hands can't reach them anymore. My father did not leave me a mansion. He did not leave me a company. He did not leave me revenge wrapped in legal papers. He left me a jacket, a recipe, a few $1,000s in a coffee can, and a town full of people who remembered being loved by him. That was enough, more than enough. Because family is not the loudest last name in the room. Family is who shows up when the door closes behind you. Respect is not a favor someone grants you when you behave. Self-worth is not something you prove by suffering quietly. And dignity is not pride. Pride demands that everyone see you. Dignity means you still know who you are when nobody does. So if you are listening to this, and someone has made you feel like a guest in your own life, hear me clearly. You do not have to burn the house down to leave it. You do not have to scream to tell the truth. You do not have to stay small so other people can feel generous. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk out into the cold, keep your hands over what still lives inside you, and trust that somewhere, somehow, the love you came from left a light on. My husband threw me into a snowstorm when I was 7 months pregnant, but he did not throw me away. He threw me back toward myself, and that is where my real life began. So tell me in the comments, if your family erased your name from something you helped build, would you fight to be added back? Or would you build your own table and never ask them for a seat again?